Over the decades, video games have delivered incredible stories, innovative mechanics, and unforgettable moments. But not every release hits the mark. Some games miss so epically that they will go down in history, not for greatness, but for their failure. In this video, we're counting down the 10 worst video games of all time. These aren't just disappointing or average titles, these are games that were critically panned, broken at launch, or downright offensive. We'll look at how they happened, how they sold, and most importantly, why they failed. Let's begin the countdown. Bubsy has always been an underappreciated mascot, but his 2D games at least had their audience. That changed with Bubsy 3D, a title that tried to jump into the third dimension but left its dignity behind. Developed by Eidetic, who would later go on to create the Siphon Filter series, Bubsy 3D was plagued with terrible controls, a disorientating camera, and barren, low-poly environments. What made it worse, it was released in the same year as Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot, which made it immediately dated, ugly, and unfun. Sales were modest, but critical reception was brutal. The game was universally mocked and has since become a go-to example of how not to make a 3D platformer. Bubsy never fully recovered.
Hi, my name is Jane. We hardly know each other, but that's about to change. You're going to get to know a lot about me.
The 3DO was marketed as a next-gen multimedia machine, but Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is one of the reasons it failed to catch on. This bizarre title masquerades as an interactive romantic comedy, but it's really just a slideshow with bizarre audio and adult themes. There's no animation, no real gameplay, just still images, bad voice acting, and a plot that spirals into absurdity. The game didn't sell well, but its legacy exploded in the internet age, with many citing it as one of the worst games of all time. It's so bad it's become infamous. An accidental cult classic that shows what happens when content is rushed and quality is ignored.
Polka dots are not seersucker. Just wear it. It'll make a good impression.
On who? The rats? Ma, I'm a...
What's that about? A lot of stuff about the symbol on your back you don't know. Like what?
Ride to Hell Retribution promised a gritty biker revenge story. What players got was a barely functioning game that felt like it skipped several stages of development. The open world design was abandoned halfway through development, and what remained was a clunky, repetitive beat 'em up with unresponsive controls, glitchy animations, and some of the most awkward cutscenes in gaming history. The game was widely mocked for its juvenile tone and infamous scenes where fully clothed characters engage in romantic encounters, if you can call them that. Reviews were scathing. IGN gave it a 1 out of 10, and it sold fewer than 25,000 copies before quietly disappearing from shelves. It's one of the clearest examples of how a rushed project can ruin any potential. This should have been a slam dunk. A Superman game on the N64. What could go wrong? Everything, it turns out. Instead of saving the world, players spent most of the time flying through rings in a foggy, textureless environment. The controls were barely functional, and the game was riddled with bugs and collision issues. The story was minimal, the visuals were subpar even for the time, and the developer, Titus Interactive, blamed licensing restrictions from DC and Warner Bros. For the end result. Despite its reputation, the game sold over 500,000 copies, likely on the strength of the Superman brand, but it remains one of the most ridiculed games in history. Based on the 2000s film reboot of Charlie's Angels, this GameCube game failed on nearly every level. Players control the three angels through a series of lifeless environments, fighting generic enemies in repetitive, sluggish combat. Animations were stiff, AI is non-existent, and the entire game feels completely unfinished. Critics panned it on release, citing poor level design, bad voice acting, and uninspired gameplay. It didn't sell well and quickly vanished from store shelves. Today, it's often brought up in discussions of the worst licensed games ever released. Drake of the 99 Dragons was pitched as the start of a new action franchise, complete with comics and potential spin-offs. What players got was a confusing, broken third-person shooter with a nearly incomprehensible plot and some of the worst voice acting on the original Xbox. The targeting system barely worked, movement was erratic, and deaths often felt like the result of bugs rather than difficulty. Reviews were harsh across the board and the game sold very poorly. Plans for a franchise were quickly dropped. Today, Drake of the 99 Dragons stands out as a cautionary tale of over-promising and under-delivering.
Nothing can stop me now.
On the surface, the Guy game is a trivia party title with adult themes. In reality, it's a controversial, exploitative product that ended in legal disaster. Featuring live-action footage of women being filmed during spring break events, the game encouraged players to answer trivia questions correctly to unlock clips. But shortly after release, it was discovered that one of the featured women was underage at the time of filming. The game was immediately pulled from the shelves and a lawsuit followed. Beyond the controversy, the game itself was shallow, repetitive, and widely seen as distasteful. It's not just one of the worst games ever released, it's one of the most legally questionable.
But I gotta tell you, I got a hard one. Alright, the question is...
Few games have generated as much outrage as Custer's Revenge. Released for the Atari 2600, this adult-themed game cast players as General Custer, navigating past arrows to assault a tied-up woman. The game was immediately condemned by women's rights groups, politicians and the media. Many retailers refused to stock it and protests erupted across the US. Technically crude and morally reprehensible, Custer's Revenge is often cited as one of the most offensive games ever made. It didn't just fail as a product, it damaged the reputation of an already fragile video game industry. There are bad games and then there's big rigs. Released in 2003, this truck racing game was missing essential features, like collision detection, physics or opponents that actually moved. Players could drive through bridges, reverse infinitely fast and win every race by default. Even the victory screen was a meme, "Your winner." Critics called it one of the most broken releases of all time. It sold poorly and developer Stellar Stone quietly disappeared shortly after. Today, it's a legend in bad game design, a benchmark in failure. It's the game that helped crash an entire industry. E.T. was rushed into the market in just 5 weeks to meet the 1982 holiday season. The result? A confusing, frustrating experience where players constantly fell into pits, struggled to understand objectives, and ultimately gave up. Despite selling over 1 million copies initially, the game saw massive returns. Atari was left with millions of unsold cartridges, many of which were famously buried in a New Mexico landfill. E.T. became a symbol of industry overreach, and is widely blamed at least in part for the video game crash of 1983. It remains to this day the most infamous failure in gaming history. These 10 games represent more than just poor design. They're case studies in what can go wrong when creativity, time, and quality control are just thrown out the window. Whether they were broken, offensive, or just plain unfinished, they left a mark on the industry, for better or worse. Have you played any of these games, or do you think I've missed something even worse? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this dive into gaming's darkest corners, make sure you like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell. I'll catch you on the next one.